Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Hey folks, good morning and welcome back to episode 4 of 6 in our Lancashire IFE CPD mini-series on structural firefighting and tactical ventilation. In this episode, we are being joined once again by Karel Lambert in a presentation on 3 kinds of fire. Now, what does that mean? That means dust off the old IFE books. And actually, I suppose for many listeners, the IFE exams aren't mandatory anymore, so maybe this is the first time you've ever heard this stuff. So we're going to be talking about how fire produces energy. We're going to talk about heat release rates. Karel's going to take us through some calculations. He's going to be helping us understand the difference between fuel-controlled fires, i.e. fuel-limited, and ventilation-controlled fires, i.e. ventilation-limited. How do they transition? Are they all the same? At what point in a fire does it shift from one to the other? We'll talk about the mass loss rate. And we're going to talk about what that looks like practically. How have fires changed? You know, people often say that fire's been around since the cavemen. Okay, but it's changed as well. Why? Because the fuel has changed. We are not surrounded by sticks and stones and bracken and twigs all the time now. Look around where you are right now. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're running, maybe you're in the gym, you're in home. You are surrounded by petrochemicals. You are surrounded by sofas and TVs and sports equipment and gyms and cars and mobile phones and everything else. So that affects things. That arc to flashover has come down significantly. He makes a great reference to Steve Kerber in a presentation he gave at FDIC in 2012. So there's loads here. There's a lot to go through it. This is really one where you're going to need to download the presentation for it as well. There might be a few moments in here when you're like, oh God, what is he referring to? He speaks about a few graphs, which if you're not familiar with, you're definitely going to need to have a look at and probably listen to this alongside it. So a really, really useful one today. Really, really helpful for people, with all due respect, not just in the infancy of their career, but also, I could think of people 20, 30 years in the job who still don't really know this stuff. Does that make them rubbish firefighters? Well, no, not necessarily. One of my favourite quotes from John McDonough actually is, "We rise to the level of competency that avoids further scrutiny." And basically, all the fires go out eventually. They eventually become fuel controlled again, and they burn out. But could we be doing it better? And with a foundational understanding around fire growth, from both that incipient to the growth phase, how does it transition when it becomes fully developed, flashes over, drops into decay, becomes fuel controlled once again? All of these elements are referenced today and gives you some really good real world examples. So again, there's a bunch of photos and stuff on the presentations which would be really useful to you to look at to get a fuller understanding of everything that Karel goes through today. So without further ado, I will hand over to the very wise and wonderful Karel Lambert. I'll see you on the other side.
Long time ago, if there was a fire, the window broke, or there wasn't any window and the fire started venting through the window, and things changed. So we no longer have one type of fire behavior. Fires changed. So I'm going to start with some mathematical description, and I know some of you won't like that, but I will do it anyway. I told you before, I like to put up the bar high. Yeah. So once a fire starts, why is it continuing? What happens in that process that the fire keeps on going? It needs air, fuel, and what does the fuel do? It decomposes. And why does it decompose? Thermal degradation. Why? It's a chemical reaction, but why does it happen? Why doesn't this chemical react in the same way? There is no heat. So you need heat to have a chemical reaction, a decomposition reaction, which we call pyrolysis. And then the pyrolysis gases will mix with air, and this keeps on going, right? So if you use this, you have the flames here. Part of the energy is that's a black arrow, radiated back to the fuel. The fuel is increasing in temperature. So part of the energy is being conducted away in the fuel. It just goes away. Part of it radiates away again. Part of it is convected away. But the remaining is used to vaporize. Vaporize not being the good word, to pyrolyze. And those are the whitish arrows. They go up. They mix with the air, and this is an ongoing process. Suppose that's clear-cut for everybody. You have to understand that in order to be capable of extinguishing a fire. So somewhere in that reaction, you have to stop one of the processes. The processes being, there is a production of heat. Fires produce heat, and part of that is coming back to the fuel. And that keeps on going. If you can stop that, the fire will stop. The heat is producing fuel, and then that fuel is being combusted with air. So if you can stop that, the process has been stopped as well. So fuel-controlled fire, if you put it in a beautiful mathematical equation, it looks like this. Yeah. So the heat release rate is this. This is the mass loss rate. This is the heat of combustion. A good way to explain mass loss rate, you all know a campfire, you all know this. Let's say we are in the youth movement. I did like 15 years in the youth movement. I know John finds it a strange term, but it's like scouting, yeah? And so so if you are preparing a campfire, you make with wooden sticks and branches from trees. Now, let's imagine we do that on a big scale. And we connect the number of a scale on a television screen. And before we light the fire, it says 100.00 kilograms. Everybody visualizes that? Now I start the fire. What happens with the number on my screen? It goes down, because when you pyrolyze, solid mass is converted into gases and they go up. They're no longer pushing onto the scale. The speed at which this happens, this is the mass loss rate. So how fast are you losing mass? And that mass is being combusted. When every matter, wood, coal, methane, has a certain constant value, which is called the heat of combustion. If you have 1 kilogram of material, how much energy do you get? And if you have a fuel-controlled fire, the fuel is determining what's happening. It means there is enough air. Then the mass loss rate combined with the heat of combustion determine how many heat release rate you have. Okay?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
So, fire on the balance, it's going, the number is going down. That's a very easy way to represent a fuel-controlled fire. Where do we have fuel-controlled fires in our real life? Typically at the beginning. Every fire starts as a fuel-limited fire. And then it grows, and it grows and grows, and at a certain point it turns into a ventilation-controlled fire because there is suddenly not enough air to support the fire that has grown. So important to remember: mass loss rate, kilograms per second, heat of combustion, megajoules per kilogram. Yeah, this is the equation, and then I'm about to stop, so it's okay. This is the ventilation controlled fire equation. So the fire where you have flames exiting through the window, this is the way how we calculate the heat release rate. It's a bit simple, but it's valid for one opening. And often our fires only have one opening, a door or a window. So it's the heat release rate. This one is expressed in kilowatts, 1500 times the area of the opening times the square root of the height of the opening. It isn't rocket science, believe me. If you fill in the numbers, then you get a heat release rate. So 2 ways to look at 2 different fires, the fuel-controlled one and the ventilation-controlled one, where the flames get out of the window. So this type of fire. You could also have a ventilation-controlled fire where everything is closed up. Then this equation doesn't apply. So far for the math. I hope everybody is still awake. Check your neighbor. Nobody fell asleep during this piece of math. So we teach this to crew commanders in Belgium. And if people think, well, why are you doing that? Because this is the way it works. And if you understand the equations, you can suddenly start to understand why things happen. So the curve you see now is what we call the ventilated fire, the black line with its phases, because In order to have such a fire, you need ventilation. You can't have this shape of fire behavior if there's not enough air. In the drawings and the paintings I showed you, flames was coming through the window. In that one photo, flames was coming through the window. You can only have that if you have a window or a door which is open. You need that opening for air to go into the fire. Back in the days, or in Australia, they're still in those days, they still have single glazing. If you have a fire with single glazing, you don't need that much heat to break the window. So the fire self-ventilates. And that was the case in the UK, that was the case in Belgium, it was the case all around the place in the 50s or so. Single glazing, window breaks, fire becomes fully developed. And this is its description, the ventilated fire. Up to the 70s, it was the only fire problem we had. Fires always behaved in that manner. So when is the fire fuel controlled in this graphic? Yes, incipient, and what else? Yeah, if it becomes fully devolved, then it's ventilation control. But when is it also fuel controlled? Or in the decay, it becomes fuel controlled again, because there's so little fuel left that suddenly there is enough air to support that combustion. A link to ventilation. If a fire is fuel controlled, then you can use a fan. The consequence will not be that hard. The fire has already enough air. There will be some because you also add some turbulence, but it will be limited. Whereas a ventilation limited fire, add a fan and you see beautiful things. So when is which formula applicable? So the first formula can be used here, can also be used here, but this is not really interesting. But in this case, the fire becomes fully developed, and there you have that other formula, which is actually kind of easy to estimate the heat release rate. We talked about the ventilated fire, that curve. Did that fire always behave identically? In other words, is it the same fire now when the window is open? Let's say it's a summer day, somebody's bedroom's window is open, there's a fire in the bedroom, the fire becomes fully involved, and then we arrive. Did that fire behave in the same manner as, like, say, 50 or 100 years ago? I see somebody, no, why not? What happened with the fuel inside? Yeah, it used to be natural, and now it's petrochemical. So it used to be this, and now it's this. And what's the consequence of that change? A fire which behaves a lot quicker. So Steve Kerber is an American dude who did plenty of research into this topic. And what he found is in the 50s, time from the first flames till flashover was half an hour. In the 70s, it was like 17 minutes. And now it's 2 to 4 minutes. That's how it changed. It used to be very slow, and now it's like a Ferrari. Tactical consequences, the way I explained this to firefighters, in the 1950s, we had another way of dealing with fire. Our doctrine was first to rescue, and extinguishing the fire comes later. And so the fire service arrived. They went into the house, got the people out. Good job. At the other side of the street, there was a pub. And so they went to the pub to have a beer because they had done hard work. And then they went back in to stop the fire. In half an hour, that's possible, right? In the 70s, they did the rescue, got out, saw the pub, but there was no time left. They had to go directly in to extinguish the fires. And nowadays, the pub is gone. It's gone out of business. Things change. There is that fire. And there is no time left to do search and rescue. You can't search a house in two minutes. So now we have to put out the fire first. So the fact that fires have become faster have plenty of consequences.
In other news, this episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the center of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. You can view battery life, air pressure, and estimated time remaining either independently on the M1 itself or from the Luna connected device screen. Also, still with the air status, alarm information, search status, and all of this provided to the incident command for confident decision making during the scene. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. One of the key parts of the Luna is their FAST system, the Firefighting Assisting Search Technology. This combines directional and distance information with thermal imaging to help find separated teammates and decrease response time. It actually connects you to the other crews in the vicinity for a unified search during the time of mutual aid by instantly notifying the network of lunar devices when there is a downed crew member, allowing for a prompt search and rescue. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. It enables you to see the exact location of your firefighters on the scene. And it doesn't require you to be sat on the station. The MSA hub then provides a wireless gateway straight to the cloud, enabling wireless on-scene data for local and remote incident command for additional eyes on the scene. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity. MSA is dedicated to increasing safety in the fire service through technological advancements. Various feature enhancements, new products, partnerships, and integrations will provide additional capabilities readily accessible by products, software, and services in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
Who's seen YouTube movies where the Americans knock out all the windows and suddenly fire all around? Who's seen such movies on YouTube? Are they stupid? No, they're not. In the 50s, knocked out the windows, the smoke went away, they could go in, they could see the victims, put out the fire, and the fire has changed, and they haven't realized enough that the fire has changed. And stuff which used to work in the past doesn't work anymore. We have such an urban legend in Brussels that up to somewhere between the First and the Second World War, maybe a bit later, every night, 8 o'clock, the senior NCO on duty ordered the guys to take buckets and wet all the wheels of the trucks. Why do you think we did that? Well, it stems from Brussels fire was started in 1800. Back in the days, the wheels were wood, and you have these connections with, I don't know the word in English, but you have a pin that goes in somewhere, and that's how the structure of the wheel is fit. And wood, which is dry, shrinks, and then you can have deconnection and your wheel falls into pieces. So with wooden wheels, you have to wet the wheels every day to make sure that doesn't happen. But then we switched to rubber tires and we kept on wetting the wheels because we didn't know anymore why we were doing what we're doing. First lecture starts with why. Yeah? And we're all laughing, but I'm wondering how much other stuff are we doing? Why? Because we've done it all these years like that. And society has changed. And plenty of our battlefield has changed. And how much of our procedures have not been adapted to our new environment. Who has a good idea how to deal with an electric bus on fire? Any of you has an idea? I don't, but maybe you can enlighten me. But that's an example of things changing. And yesterday evening, I was chatting with some guys and we were talking about the ferry from France, which now has EVs on board. And the day will come that one of these electrical vehicles will start to burn. No? Yeah, okay. Yeah. And that's just an example. Yeah. Combustible facades. I don't know if you saw Valencia, the fire in Valencia. Same cladding as in Grenfell. It happened during the day. Only 10 people got killed. If that would have happened during the night, it would have been a comparable result. Only because it was in the day and everybody was awake and plenty of people weren't even in the building. That's a risk. We had a similar fire in Brussels. Luckily, a smaller building, but we were fighting 6 floors, 6 apartment fires, one on top of the others. So we're not as big as London, but that's about the maximum we could do. If it would have been a fire, a floor more, then yeah, we were out of resources. We're not ready to deal with that kind of change. So what else has changed? So this is an example of something that has changed in our fire behavior, and we need to deal with that. So Steve did the research, and we should all be open for that message. Things are changing. Very swift evolution. That also means if you arrive at a fire and you open the door, now you just gave that fire the ventilation it needs. 2 to 4 minutes later, you can expect something we call ventilation-induced flashover. Do all firefighters know that, especially the ones who are 20 years on the job and maybe didn't go to refresher training as much as they should? That's the thing. Yeah, opening a door is ventilation. So we distinguish 2 burning regimes, fuel controlled and ventilation controlled. What is controlling the growth of the fire? Yeah. In the fuel control stage, it's the fuel, and that's rarely a problem because it's not like you can go in and take fuel out. Yeah, that's a good idea if you have forest firefighting and you try to create a fire-free zone. Yeah. But in the way we build our buildings, our fires are most of the time ventilation controlled because we have double glazing. Yeah. So then the available air determines what's about to happen. Yeah. So in this graph, it's fuel controlled here, it's fuel controlled here, but it's ventilation controlled here, and somewhere throughout flashover, it becomes ventilation controlled, and suddenly another set of rules apply. So I have a movie clip which illustrates that principle perfectly. I think it's British. So it's a shop. They're talking English, I guess. It's not Australian. I think it's English, British English. So you see the window here, it's single glazing, and now the door is open, and so the top of the door is used to vent smoke, and the bottom is used to have air enter. What you see here is a light. It's not a fire. The fire is in the back. Yeah. But you have like 2 square meters as an opening, and that's it. But the fire will break the window. Very well known sound. Windows break. And you see immediately that the fire reacts. The orange glow, the fire now gets more air. But it's only, this window is still intact, this window is still intact. There's only a hole here in the middle. This part is still intact. And you see a different flow in the door. Yeah, more air is coming through that door because there's a hole here. You see the fire growing. The only thing that changed was maybe a square meter of window extra opening. You can see there is a piece of glass here. Look at the door. It's back to where it came from. It adapted to the new amount of air. It's just burning hotter, higher heat release rate. Look at the turbulence in the smoke, the indicator for heat release rate. More window surface breaks, so more air, so more fierce fire. And it keeps on going. Little by little, all the glass falls out, and the fire grows and grows and grows. That's the same fuel inside. Imagine you're the floor above. When the window was still intact, that was not such big of a deal, but now it becomes a deal because this is like a multi-megawatt fire. Yeah. In Belgium, I always say, for the fans of the high-pressure booster line, give it a try. Yeah, but if you use more water, you will be able to extinguish this quicker. So what we illustrate here is the relation between amount of air and heat release rate. Amount of air goes up, the heat release rate does as well. So that's something quite important. So ventilated fires have 2 important phases for us where we pay attention to. That's the growth phase. Typically small fire producing smoke. It's growing and we crawl underneath. We stay low, we cool the gases until we find the fire and we extinguish it. But this is a whole different ballgame. Yeah. So typically here we'll throw in water from the outside and apply a transitional attack. So if it's too much, then we'll go defensive and we'll be on the outside. Because, yeah, if this building is burning like this, I'm not going to send my guys in. For what? To save some bricks? So this is the 1950s. Probably didn't have BA, not really, not a choice. So it's defensive, it's on the exterior. That's the approach. And then, yeah, this is the 1910 in Chicago. Apparently they introduced the first breathing apparatus in 1912. Yeah, suddenly we can go offensive. We can go on in the interior, and that brings risks along with it. But we can only do that because technology evolves. Yeah, and that's also one of the things in the fire service. How do we implement new technology? Some is good, some is less good. Luckily, this got modernized and we got better pieces of kit. Also, the way we cool the gases changed. So John talked about the Mark I short pulsing robot. Now we have the Mark II long pulsing robot. I'm kidding. Now we have firefighters who can think and apply their pulses, short, long, how much. dependent of the situation they're in. Yeah. So we cool the gases more or less with long pulses, and then to extinguish the fire, we can go direct or indirect. And we need to teach it to our firefighters to deal with the fire. Typically, if the fire is in its growth phase, we will apply a direct attack. If we have a fully developed fire and we're attacking it from the inside, we will apply an indirect attack. John showed us this morning this prop where you can do it from the outside, but you also can do it from the inside. So we start easily to give our firefighters the possibility to gather experience. Well, we built that prop and I got the honor to try it for the first time. And I remember when I was walking towards the exiting flames, I thought, this is kind of badass because you stick your hand into the flames. But a second later, no more flames. So it's very powerful, but it's like jumping into the water for the first time when you're learning how to swim. Yeah. So we give them the feeling of this is working from the outside, and then we put them on the inside with smoke flowing out, really hot. So we have a fully hot fire inside, maybe 4 or 5 megawatts, and they do the same thing, and hey, it works. And this leads to this situation. I'm not going to show the footage again, but it's the footage that John showed going down the hallway and then quarter turn and indirect attack into the room. So this is, when it comes to fully developed fires, where we want to get with our firefighters. So they are able to advance to the fire safely, cooling the gases, and then effectively knocking down that fire. And so we teach them these concepts so they know what they are doing.
Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial and fire training professionals. Now, next up, and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection, this is a good one. It's International Fire Protection Magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire Magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show. Transitional attack came around. Also the Americans who did the scientific research. So in the case of a fully developed fire, an opening, the flames are coming out. It's important that we can reach it with a jet. And here it says 5 to 15 seconds. Actually, it is until the flames are knocked down. Yeah. Something we're struggling with because firefighters, sometimes they apply too much water. I know in the UK, some of you are really worried about what steam is going to do. Well, steam becomes challenging if you apply way too much water. So before applying water in that volume, you have a volume applied, a volume filled with burning gases. Temperature maybe like 1,000 degrees C. And you're throwing in a couple of liters water. The water will cool down that hot environment and turn into steam. And the steam will expand. On the other side, the volume with very hot gases will be cooled, and these will shrink. So as long as the water is being heated by energy from the gases, there is some kind of volume equilibrium. Once the flames have been knocked down, the temperature inside is maybe 200, 150 degrees centigrade, 250. But you don't have the energy anymore in the gases to cool the water, and it will start to cool the surroundings, the concrete and the brick walls. They will now give off the heat that you need to vaporize the water. But there will be no more contraction because concrete and heat
don't tend to contract. The engineering in me is saying, yes, they do, but it's actually a very, very, very small amount. So you won't see it. And there is for every liter of water you inject, 2 metric cubes of steam being generated. And then steam goes all over the place. So it's important to shut off that nozzle as soon as the flames have been knocked down. Then it's perfectly possible to be in the next room, in the hallway with the door open, and don't have any problem with steam whatsoever. Been there, done that. Yeah, but it's very important that they shut the nozzle when the flames go away. There needs to be a balance. And so we try to train our firefighters. And in that prop we have, we can easily show them. Because if you give too much, plenty of steam goes over you. It's not very comfortable, but you don't even get burned. But it's not like, let's not do this again. And we have them do it again and just use a little bit less of water, and then they can see by themselves that there is an equilibrium possible between steam in the room which is burning and hardly anything where I am sitting. It's just about closing the nozzle when the flames are gone. That's a very important message. So what transitional attack does, this is again the ventilated fire curve, the red line. Transitional attack pushes the heat release rate or the temperatures down, and if you just hit it from the yard, as the Americans call it, you hit it from the yard, you knock the fire down, and then you do nothing, the expectation is that 2 to 4 minutes later, the fire will have rekindled and you will have another flash over and it will be fully involved again. Is that a problem? No. What you have to do is here, knock it down again. Yeah, I had such a case. I don't know if some people were at Morton in March and October at the high-rise summit. I delivered a lecture on the high-rise fire we had in Brussels, and we didn't have any water on the inside for some strange reason. And from the basket of the ladder truck, they applied 5 times water. First to knock it down, and then I got in with a crew of firefighters, and each time the fire grew, I asked, knock it down again. And that took 20 minutes before we got the water on the fire floor. But each time, back to square one, back to square one, back to square one. If the guy who has the nozzle doesn't use too much water, that isn't a problem whatsoever. You can keep that fire in check. Case study, also British. That's a substantial amount of fire. I don't know the building, but what if there's people stuck the floor above? If you have to do interior attack, it will take time before you can attack that fire and reduce the heat release rate. And that fire is growing in this direction. These flames are attacking the floor above. So speed is important. Fire service has arrived, stretching hoses. Look at that huge amount of fire and let's see how a transitional attack deals with that. Filling the hose takes some time. See the smoke here? If we don't intervene, that window will break and the fire will spread. The pump is coming up. 2 guys with a nozzle throwing some water in. Look how effective that is. But this is the moment I would stop. Now they're creating steam because there's no more flames to compensate for that mechanism. So that's maybe 20, 30 seconds too much, which it will make it harder for crews to go in because they will go in a humid and hot environment, which will not be the case if they shut it off as soon as the flames go away. But overall, extremely effective. If there's people on the floor above, they just bought a huge amount of time for those people. If the windows in the facade are still there, now they will remain there because these flames that go up are gone. So very, very effective. In theory, you could also do this from the interior to the interior. Imagining you're going down a long hallway, there is a big room, 40, 50, 60 square meters at the end of the hallway, and flames are going towards you, and you don't get there, not even with the gas cooling, it's just too much. You can apply the same thing. It's like an exceptional measure to try to get closer. Yeah, if the fire pushes you too far, with a jet you have a further reach, and you can apply interior to interior some kind of transitional attack, and that might also work. It will depend on the geometry of that room.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drillbook, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, knots and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to Jessup, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show.
Okay, we talked a big deal about ventilated fires. We talked about how in the 50s it took half an hour to get them to flash over, and now it takes 2 to 4 minutes. Well, it has become very actual, very contemporary. Yeah, in the 70s, Israel had some kind of fuss with its neighbors. Well, seems like they're back to square one because they're doing it again. Yeah, but in the 70s, that led to oil prices spiking. Before that, we all had single glazing because we could afford just put in more oil. But when oil prices increased, some places, I don't know how bad it was in the UK, but in Belgium we had a whole period where, you had these people waiting at gas stations to fill up the car. And when I say waiting, maybe an hour, because it was dosed, you could take 10 or 20 liters and that was it, because there wasn't enough for everybody. So that led to a second change. The first change was the fact that we got rid of natural fuel, the things in our house. Who of you knows the name Ed Hartin? It's an American guy who's really into CFBT. And he told me, when I go to Home Depot or to a furniture store with my wife, she sees furniture. All I see is fuel packages. So these fuel packages, these changed, and that caused the first big change in fire behavior. But the change from single to double glazing caused a second change in fire behavior. And we call that in Belgium the underventilated fire, and that's because the fire becomes ventilation controlled prior to flashover, and you get this line. So that's the definition. I'm not going to read it. And this is what it looks like. No flames and plenty of smoke. And the knowledge that if you open the door, things get really bad. The smoke stopper, which we have on most Belgian engines, that's a way to deal with it more or less. Block the airflow in the fire. And then you have more time to do what you have to do. Another tactic was to apply door control. Leave a guy at the door to keep the door as close as possible and feed the hose inward or pull the hose inward. That's also a tactic. It took us years to get along with these fires, find a way how to deal with them. So both are ventilation controlled. This is fully developed, and this is what we call underventilated. Both lack air, but the view is completely different. The approach is completely different as well. So for us, it's extremely important that crew commanders can recognize the difference. And in this picture, it's very clear. It isn't always that clear. So do the underventilated fires always behave the same way? Is every underventilated fire following the same time frame? No. What would be possible differences? How big the compartment, is that what you're saying? Yeah. Why? If you have a big compartment like this one, there is plenty of oxygen, way more than in the toilet next door. If it's small space, you have less oxygen. So that plays a role. And also the air tightness. How much air is coming through cracks and gaps, that also plays a role. Yeah. So fuel controlled, ventilation controlled, and it remains ventilation controlled up till the end. Who has been to a fire, actually a fire call, and when you arrived and you broke the door of the unit, everything inside was full of soot, it was blackened, but there was no more fire to be found. It had auto-extinguished and even the heat was gone. I see a couple of people nodding. Yeah. Who has 30 years or more in the fire service here? Yeah. Did you have such fires in the beginning of your career? Yeah, still? Okay. But yeah, 30 years ago is already, when did you start? 92, yeah. There was already plenty of double glazed buildings. Yeah. When I used to ask this question 15, 20 years ago at old timers, is that a good word in English? At old timers, when I joined, the old guys were in from the 60s, and then they never had such fires. Yeah, windows broke and fires self-vented. And the problem of fires being completely ventilation controlled, auto-extinguishing, and then show up and be disappointed because shit, the fire is extinguished. Yeah, that's a problem, a recent problem getting bigger and bigger. Now, for the people in the other units in the same building, it's a good thing, because that fire stays in the same, in one unit. I guess that might not apply to Australia, where you have wooden buildings. Yeah? It's only this way because we have concrete and brick buildings, and the fire can't go to the adjacent unit because there's a fire-rated wall. I don't know how it is in UK, but in Belgium, we are getting little by little also wooden buildings. And they should have a fire-rated wall, but reality teaches us that's not always the case. Sometimes people cut corners, make holes and don't create a fire stop, and then such a fire will spread to the adjacent building. So the FCVC point, the switch from fuel control to ventilation controlled, that point is important. The later it falls, the hotter the gases you will have inside. If the fire becomes ventilation controlled really quick, that means from now on the heat release rate is blocked. And if you have a low amount of heat release rate, you will also have low temperatures. Whereas if the fire grows and grows and grows for a long time before it becomes ventilation controlled, now you will have hot temperatures. And to give you an order of magnitude, in the latest research of UL, they set on fire a bed in a bedroom or a three-person couch in a living room, and they measured up to 1,000 degrees centigrade before the fire got ventilation limited. Imagine that 2 minutes later, you're going in there, how hot is it still there? And you think, everything is closed, this should be okay. I've put in a smoke stopper, no air is coming in. It shouldn't be warm. So also that stuff is changing. So if the FCVC point is here, you will have this fire with low temperatures. But if it's later, then you can get really hot temperatures before everything damps out. And the more insulation you have, the more the energy will be stuck inside. So all kinds of underventilated fires. You can have this one as well. When do we get this format of heat release rate or temperature? It's called a pulsating fire. When would we have that? What do you need to have that? Yeah, for example, if that window, only the top one would be broken, and this would be the ceiling height of the building, then that would be be used for ventilation, evacuation of smoke, air in, smoke out, and the heat release rate would just follow. And it's very rare, but it exists.
Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifeline's Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show.
So here you see the smoke stopper in action. Very powerful tool. I'm actually amazed that it's not in use all over the UK because it's cheap. We're talking maybe £400 a piece. That's not big money. It's also easy. In half an hour, I can teach you how to use it. So anti-ventilation and interior attack are a good way to deal with underventilated fires. Just keep everything closed and crawl in, find the fire, put water on it, open up, vent, you're done. What you do have in the UK is Cobra cold cutters. We have one or no. By now we have 6 or 7 in Belgium, but I would like to have more. But that's also a possibility. And then vent. Piercing nozzles. So these are pics from Sweden in a pre-backdraft situation. It's such a backdraft simulator. I was there, they opened the door, backdraft showed, they closed it again. Piercing nozzle, we opened up, nothing happened. There's quite some scientific research on that. So if everything's closed up and nobody is inside, then injecting water can also be quite a help. Third change. Buildings become more and more airtight. Also there, I think it's a topic. There is more and more research. That's also a problem for the fire service. Fires are behaving differently. What would be the consequence of a more airtight building for us or for the fire? Yes, but what else? Because if the air is being used, you would say the fire will be small. That would be helpful. The change that I have in mind is not helpful at all. Pressure, yeah. So if you have a closed environment and now you're creating heat, hot gases want to expand, and in the decades before us, the pressure pushed smoke outside through leaks and gaps. But now if there is way less leaks and gaps, the hot smoke wants to expand, it can't. And if you stop something from expanding, you get a spike in pressure. Yeah. And this is again experiment by UL. So here you have up to 1,000 degrees centigrade before it drops down. And this corresponds with a 150 Pascal pressure. Anybody of you who knows how much a Pascal is? I suppose you all know how much a kilogram is and you have an idea, or a liter or a pint. You can visualize that. But I don't think anybody can visualize a Pascal. I'm not going to tell the joke. I have a great joke, but I'm not going to tell it.
You want the joke?
Okay. Well, let's give it a try. Okay. Pascal was, he lived, right? He was a scientist. And 1 Pascal is 1 Newton per square meter. Yeah, and Newton also lived. He was a British guy. Yeah? He invented gravity. So Pascal, Newton, and Einstein are playing hide and seek. Let's imagine for a while they live in the same time frame. And Einstein is he's counting while the other 2 are hiding. And in the meantime, Newton is arriving. British guy, smart guy with a crayon, and he draws a square on the ground, and he just stands waiting. And Einstein's done. Yeah, I'm find you. Nope. Newton per square meter. You found Pascal. Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. I've had worse crowds. Now, a Newton per square meter, that doesn't say you anything either, does it? Now, a good way to visualize that is to take paper from the printer and to cut the shape of your hand and put that piece of paper on your hand. What you feel then is about 1 Pascal. It's about 100 grams. Lots of paper is 80, 90, 100 grams per square meter. So that's what you feel. So if you want to put it into a value that you do understand, 10 pascals are a kilogram per square meter. So 150 pascals per square meter, that's 15 kilograms per square meter. And if you put that into practice, that's a door which you have to pull towards you to open it. If the door is 2 square meters, it means that 30 kilograms is pushing to keep it closed. Who thinks he can pull 30 kilograms? I think a big bunch of us can. Pete certainly can. But what if this is not in a very closed building? What if it becomes 500 pascals? Now 100 kilogram is pushing on that door. It's maybe possible that the crutch, is that how you call it? The handle, that it breaks off and the door remains closed. I know such a story in Germany a couple of years back. There is a businessman who has an office space, and in the same office space, he has a small studio for when he has to work late. Yeah? And one day he's sleeping in that studio and the fire alarm goes off in his office space. And he goes into the office space and he wants to go to the door, which gives into the hallway of the building, and the door doesn't open and it's not locked, but he can't get out. And he quickly goes back into his bedroom and closes the door and sits the fire out. And afterwards, the door wasn't locked. It was just the pressure. There has been done research. And if I give courses on ventilation, I have such a movie clip about an experiment, and a firefighter is lighting a test fire. Just a small 700 kilogram test, a 700 kilowatt test fire. And he's lighting it, or maybe it was a megawatt, I don't know anymore. And then he wants to go back. It was in the bedroom, and he wants to open the door to get out. And done, he doesn't get out anymore, just because of the pressure. That's also a thingo. In that research, the window frame broke due to pressure. Pressure is also going to create us troubles. Yeah, it's going to be an issue. Now we can use that to our advantage. I use these 2 graphs to teach crew commanders. Let's go to the door. Imagine this is an inward swinging door, like most doors, and this is the door of the apartment. And I arrive, and it is like it's here now, but I see stains of soot all around the door. Where I am on this graph now. I don't see anything moving, but plenty of soot around the gaps of the door. Where I am in this graph now. Yeah, I'm after the spike. There has been smoke coming out. Hence, there has been overpressure. But now it's gone. So probably the peak is behind us. If I now open the door, different things can happen. It's very likely that I'm in the situation I just described. Everything is blackish, but there is no more fire. If that is the case, I'm cool. I know the fire is more or less extinguished. Second scenario, I'm arriving, plenty of smoke is being pushed through the gaps, and I see plenty of smoke coming. Where I'm now at the graph. I'm in that positive pressure zone, and the harder the smoke is flowing, the more pressure is behind and the more dangerous it is. And just by looking at the outflowing smoke and understanding this mechanism, this is an indicator for danger at the other side. Third scenario. There is soot, I open the door, and now suddenly there is an inflow of air. Now I know I'm here, in the underpressure zone, which means the peak is gone, but it's still very hot inside, because it's only gone like a minute or so. So I can expect ventilation-induced flashover quickly. So that's actually an indicator on how much danger there is. Yeah. So for the American colleagues, I put PSI as well, because they don't know SI. Okay, we're starting to arrive at the end of my presentation. So what we talked about, the ventilated fire curve and the underventilated fire, there's 2 fires where we are actually focusing on the content of the volume which is burning. Yeah. It's also possible to have a fire where the construction is burning. Grenfell being a good example. Yeah. But also, for example, if you have a pitched roof, is that how you call it? Typically, this is wood, right? And the top triangle is not being used, but maybe we have put some spotlights in there. So we have wood, we have air, we have an ignition source. If we have a smoldering fire in there, that's also a construction fire. Cobra is an ideal tool to solve that. Yeah. Here, for example, they're adding a roof onto a flat roof, remodeling. You can see how that space, you have air, you have wood. If you add some electrical cables, now you have an ignition source. And the construction can burn. Really hard to fire if you don't, really hard to fight that fire if you don't have things like piercing nozzles or a Cobra. Where you guys don't have smoke stoppers, some brigades don't have Cobras or piercing nozzles. And then you see things like this. So these are called sandwich panels. Do they use them in the UK as well? So sheet of aluminum, then combustible insulation, another sheet. So there is a fire in here, smoldering fire. Maybe they've done some cutting, typically how it works, and then due to the friction, it starts to smolder. And these guys, these are not Belgians, these are Dutch. Yeah, they're opening the aluminum sheets. What's going to happen? Yeah, you're giving air to that fire. So the fire says, thank you. More air means more fire. And they keep on removing. Einstein said such a thing. If you try to do the same thing and expect a different result, that's not really going to work out well for you. And then you get this, and they lost the whole building. Construction fires, also quite hard, and we need different tools, and the development of Cobra, piercing nozzles are the consequence of that, because different problem, you need a different solution. Yeah? Really hard to fight. This is not going to help that construction fire. The building is just going to burn down. So, air is the answer. You have to ask the question, where does the air come from? You have to be able to inject water in the hotspots to try to stop that fire from growing before you open up. I had a fire, this is, what's the word again in English? 2 walls, cavity wall, is that the word? With combustible insulation in the cavity, burning. So, yeah, there we drilled holes and we cooled until it stopped, and only then we opened the structure. So we had 3 types of fires: the ventilated, the underventilated, and the construction fires. Each of them needs a different approach, and we have to ask ourselves the question, did we train for this? Are our crews ready to deal with this? Do they have the correct gear to do that? Yeah, that's actually kind of important. Yeah, and things keep on evolving. How long time till flashover nowadays? 2 to 4 minutes. Who saw the video of UL where they overcharged an electric scooter? Did anybody see that video? Time to flash over, 30 to 45 seconds. So smoke detectors won't save those families anymore. Typically, if you pay 6,000 euros for such an electrical scooter, you're not leaving it outside. If you don't have a garage, you take it in your unit because you don't want it stolen. And then such bad stuff happens. Same thing with electrical bicycles. That's going to be a challenge. And we've only seen the beginning of it. Yeah. So also there we will have to find solutions. Imagine you're doing an attack into a burning building and suddenly that scooter says, yay, I'm with you. I start to burn too. You have an explosion, extra heat release rate. Both are dangerous to firefighters. We'll have to find ways to adapt to these new problems. And we'll find a way to train with them. Because, yeah, if we trained for these, then that won't work for our modern day problems. Thank you.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our drive and purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're around the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.